Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Repackaging Revolution. I'm your host, David Marinak. Today, I've got a friend. Keith Barnes is a fellow at the Institute of Packaging, the Royal Society of Arts in the IOM3, also known as the Institute of Materials, Minerals, and Mining. Keith is a chartered scientist and chartered environmentalist, and next month, that's December, will be receiving an award from the Institute of Materials, Minerals, and Mining for his lifetime of services to packaging. Keith is a member of the Chartered Institute of Waste Management and has delivered lectures on packaging in the US, UK, Singapore, Brussels, Munich, Prague, and more. For 58 years, Keith has and continues to be passionate about packaging, the packaging industry, and what ails it, which we're interested to hear about. I am so grateful for him taking the time to join us. Keith Barnes, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, David. I'm delighted to join you and hopefully get messages from the UK into the US and vice versa. Because we both need, as countries, to work together because packaging is such a hell of a problem everywhere in the world. And it's down to people like us to try and ease the problems.
100%. It was just talking about this with our producer this morning. And it's one of those things, Keith, there's so much stuff that we can talk about. We won't have any time filling the time. And it's almost like, man, we may be doing a recurring Keith Barnes segment for some time now, because we're just scratching the surface.
Oh, absolutely.
You've done so much and you've accomplished so much in your world. And, we've got the different tentacles of what's happening now, globally when it comes to packaging, when it comes to environmental issues and all that kind of stuff. But there's also your Michigan State and the packaging program there, which also has a tremendous amount going on. So you've got your tentacles in a bunch of different areas.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And just briefly to mention Michigan, I've been dealing and producing a Michigan summer school on packaging here in the UK every July for over 20 years now. And this, as I say, started 20 years ago. I suddenly got the job when I was in America talking to the then director of packaging at Lansing. And he agreed, yes, you can do it. And I've been doing it for 20 years odd. And they have an exciting time in July over here. I arrange visits to all manner of packaging companies in all the areas of glass, paper and board, metals, and of course, plastics. And many lectures, some of which come from me over the period of time when they are in London, then Scotland, and then Nottingham, where they'll be based for the month. So a brilliant month. Hopefully, I'm teaching them a lot about the world of packaging as we both know it when you are in it, because at the moment they are just learning and they are in for hopefully a successful shock once they get into the business and realize all the ramifications of packaging.
Well, and it's such a good segue into what I wanted to talk about anyhow. So Michigan State has the packaging program here in the U.S., and they come over and join. And did you say they spend a month with you over there, Keith?
Yes, month in July.
How about that? And then, so you go and see these. Now, let's just kind of dig into this a little bit further, because one of the things that I have seen over my 30 years in the industry is Michigan State and Clemson, and I think it's Rochester, a couple other universities have packaging programs. And sadly, now I might be wrong, but sadly, what I've seen over the years is some of the bigger companies have decided, you know what, this guy's making a big buck as our packaging designer. And again, they dump them. And suddenly these guys are scrambling. And, as a packaging engineer, you truly are an engineer. This is not something that you just kind of click your fingers and somebody walks in off the street. And it's really been demoralizing to see. Now, I may be wrong, and I hope I am. But are you seeing any sort of, just in the years that you've been involved with Michigan State and anything in general, that that the interest or the respect towards the position has decreased at all?
No, I agree with you totally. Packaging, unfortunately, is treated as a Cinderella of business. And I hate that because all of us know, the whole public knows that everything they buy has got a package around it.
Right.
And whether they like it or not, if they don't like it, they complain. If they like it, in theory, they've then got to get rid of it as waste. And that is yet another problem, which we're hoping to solve.
Yeah.
But we're exactly the same in the UK. Luckily, in America, there are 8 universities doing packaging, and Michigan is obviously the biggest one and probably been there the longest. 90+% of the students from there get a job in packaging. Whether they stay in it, I don't know, but they are all whipped up by, obviously, the big boys in America. So we don't see any of them in the UK, and I know it's difficult because there's visa problems as well. And in the UK, sadly, we only have one university just looking at the world of packaging, and they're doing a thing called an apprenticeship degree. And it is really only for people who are already in a company doing packaging and need to learn more. And as you rightly say, there's a lot to learn.
Yep.
And if you take someone off the street or you turn around to someone in purchasing and say, oh, you can do packaging, it does not work, because we all have to understand the industry, understand the problems of commerce, understand the world problems. We've got 2 wars on at the moment, which is not helping at all.
Right.
COVID didn't help any of us. And all of these problems are occurring everywhere. Nothing is calming down, and nobody's coming out as a global champion.
Right.
And consequently, companies are going off and doing their own thing and will only make life more difficult for the future. And it's so sad because we need to get everything together. And before COVID, it was not doing too badly. But sadly now, things are all going somewhat astray.
It's so interesting because I agree with you 100%. And we saw this movement that was happening before COVID, and there was conversation. There was a lot of exchange back and forth. We had retailers making statements that they were going to make changes. And then we had suppliers to retailers saying they were going to fall in line and do the same thing. And then COVID hits and everybody, it's almost like a big reset, Keith, and they've all gone back to just survival mode. Yes. And if there's ever a time, and we try to tell our staff here, if there's ever a time that packaging is needed and packaging intelligence is needed now more than ever, it's now, this present time, because people, and it's a general statement, but you've got buyers that aren't educated in the world of packaging. They are educated in cheapest price wins, and that'll never get you anywhere. Yeah. You've got a slew of higher ups or decision makers in companies beyond the buyer, if you will, that actually is just trying to satisfy the order requirement to get it to the retailer. And the retailers themselves, I've seen this, and I don't know if you've seen this in the UK, but I've seen Walmart and some of the big players make a stand. They say, oh, we're going to eliminate X and we're going to do this. But they have no idea how they're going to do it. They have no idea. And 2 or 3 years later, quietly, that just kind of drifts away to the backside. Where if there's anything you and I agree on is the fact that we have to, even if it starts in the UK and comes to the US, or the US and goes to the UK, or globally in some way, we've got to consistently start to talk about all of this information from the same pulpit, so to speak. From the same kind of. It's a global issue. This isn't a US issue or a UK issue. We have to understand, all of the different pieces, parts to packaging, and whether it's single use or whether it's returned or whether it's biodegradable or just, all those kind of things. And I just don't even know where to start, because the problem continues, especially since the reset after COVID. I don't even know where to start, but that's why I really wanted to launch this podcast and talk to people like you, because this is how we're going to make change. We just want to have a conversation,
Yeah.
and it's crazy to me how things have really gone back to the way they've always been. And we'll worry about it next year. No, now's the time.
Yes, you're absolutely right. And to me, the only way moving forward, and I worked at Boots for 10 years, and Boots is the largest pharmaceutical company in the UK that sells and is now, of course, owned by America.
Yeah.
And whether it's having any effect in America, I don't know, but it seems to be doing okay over here. And luckily, they were switched on these things. And we had departments that looked completely along the supply chain, so that you started with the raw material, whatever it was.
Yep.
You then moved into transport, production, filling, etc., into the shops. But from the point of view of Boots, they owned their own shops, so that was a lot easier.
Right, sure.
But, they were also obviously selling to other shops. And then, as we are now experiencing, the waste management side, which we didn't have before COVID, not to the degree we've got it now, where we need to be thinking about that because of climate change considerations, which is yet another of the big problems facing us all. So my aim is that all companies should be working this way, and you need to have people who can take it from one spot to the other, such as myself and probably yourself, and can move it in this direction. But this information needs to get out there.
Correct.
And at the moment, there is no simple way of doing this.
Yep. And and it's so well put. Let's stay with this in our own hypothetical perfect world. If we started just like anything else, if we teach our children, kids, students when they're young, and we help them along the way. So in our perfect world, the Michigan States, the Clemsons, and these kind of, people that can make change, the younger folks, because frankly, they're the ones that are going to carry this forward after you and I are gone. In your opinion, is it an education thing, Keith? Is it a respect kind of thing? I know I'm not using the right word. So for example, value, people only value what they pay for, meaning if they know there's a cost associated with not recycling or not disposing of waste or not understanding the types of materials used for packaging, then they tend to think differently. Whereas in the US, we've been so lazy. We are so lazy here that, waste is just, frankly, a study said waste is litter is 89% intentional. Yeah. And people learn this from their parents, and kids learn this from seeing it, and it's not okay. We need a consistent sort of reset, for another word, to be able to really kind of start this change. It seems like if we started, Keith, with you and I, then we can start to at least have a dialogue. Then we bring in guys like Dr. Christy Armit, who's a chemist and very well versed in plastics, and sharing that information. This may be our way to make change versus the start out with a Walmart who's going to make this blanket statement that they're going to force all their suppliers to be out of petroleum-based packaging. Great. Awesome. What are you going to use? Well, we don't know yet. Okay. So that doesn't work, so it's one of those things. And so maybe this approach, and that's where I'm excited about this, because you're passionate about it. I'm passionate about it. Everybody I talk to in our world, Keith, are passionate about it. But we get to that point where we go, oh, it's such a runaway train and getting anybody to change. No, that's nonsense. That's BS, as we say here in the States. No, we need to do something. And one of the things I do want to do is be able to reach out to the stateside Michigan State and begin to talk with them. Because are we educating the students about what they're going to face when they get into the big world? Meaning, they're a packaging engineer for Moen faucets, they're a packaging engineer for the Hoover vacuum cleaner or Dyson or whoever it is. But then it comes down on high that they have to, they got to ship the stuff out. So ship it any way you want. So are you going to have the backbone, Mr. Student, to be able to push back and say, wait a minute, we are not going to ship this out in substandard packaging, number one, but we're also not going to send this out in packaging that is not environmentally friendly or has gone through. And that's going to take some serious guts. That's going to take some serious change where someone says, this is no. This is against the philosophy of like Boots, for example.
Yeah.
The way Boots is making change and doing things is they control the different pieces of the process. Yes, they've got other stores, as you say, but the thing is that they actually it's a culture. It's part of their DNA. And so many other companies are just like, I don't know, just get it there, just ship it. I don't care. And I can't seem to get my hand around. Is it a political issue? Do we need, the higher ups at a company to kind of make, I don't know.
Well, I think you've hit the nail on the head. It is a political thing as far as US and UK are concerned, because
I agree.
Both of us are in the same position. We have local authorities, you have states, and in each area, they do their own things.
I know.
And quite frankly, the most important thing in my book that we have to get right is collecting our waste.
Thank you.
And this, the public don't understand. And you rightly said that in America, they couldn't care less about this and they're just dumping it. And presumably they're in a worse state than we are with littering in the UK. This has to change. And therefore, this has to be from governments. Whether that can be done in the States, I don't know how your federal system will work with all of the different states there. But in the UK, we're gradually moving it right. But of course, there's so many other problems that governments have that we're a bit down the pecking order in the line of things that they've got to sort out. So it might take a while, but the major thing is we must educate the public, and I'm prepared to go anywhere and talk to the public.
Me too.
Tens of thousands of them. If we can get them into a football ground and talk to them, I'd love to do it. But that isn't always possible. We can get on television, hopefully, and get things there and talk to people about what packaging does for them. And of course, you mentioned plastics, and our friend who
Chris,
hopefully will come on and talk later on. Plastic, sadly, is essential because of its properties that help us prevent food waste, which is far worse than packaging waste, and many other areas. And when idiot companies, and I won't mention the name,
I will, but
around
that's okay.
and say, let's do away with all plastics, they're talking out of the back of their head, because the world could not exist without plastics. And I don't care. I'll argue it with anyone. We have to have it. It has the properties and hidden chemistry that we don't yet know in many areas that will solve many, many problems. And most of all, it yields the least carbon emissions if we're talking about climate change. And most of the people, and you mentioned Walmart, said, we'll get rid of plastics. And the majority of companies say, we'll put it in cardboard. Once they put it in cardboard, the carbon emissions are going to go up, and that will increase the climate change problems. So, and also, if we do too much, we will get a problem in the paper mill industry, because they won't be able to cope. And therefore, they'll put up prices, and that won't be a good thing for business. And also, it will mean taking longer to get things done. So all of these things have to be done, but it needs getting this voice out to the public in some way and talking politics somehow. I mean, I talk to my MP, but it's not getting me very far. And in the UK, we've just got rid of our environment minister and put a new one in. So I have no idea what's going to happen now.
Start from scratch. It's what's crazy is, and Dr. Chris was, I've done several videos with him, and I definitely want him on because he is a walking encyclopedia, but plastics have become so demonized. And I don't want to come across as if it's the end all be all, but you make a lot of really great points, because without plastics, we've got obviously fire suits and fire retardants and coatings that allow a packaging to keep food from spoiling. And that's the information. It's become demonized, and it's become demonized by people that are in the opposite industries. Geez, I don't know who's funding Greenpeace these days, but I doubt it's the plastic industry. It's probably somebody in the paper world. But again, it's all of this information that clearly there's no clear-cut truth behind this. There's no clear-cut. That's why I'm so enamored with Dr. Chris, because he isn't selling anything. That's the thing. People keep kind of like, they want to attack him on LinkedIn as, oh, you're just all for plastics. He's not. He's basically saying, just know the truth. Yes. Just know what you're saying. And just because Greenpeace or some organization that you thought was legit says it, you have to be your own investigator and find out for yourself, because a lot of this information is not true. And Chris even goes into several times that there's a term for this, that when people repeat information, even if it's untrue, long enough, they begin to think it's true. Meaning yes. there's a whole kind of philosophy behind that. And if I sit there and tell you the sky is black, sky's black, sky's black, sky's black, and I begin to think, well, the sky's always black, in my world, I've just bought into this, but it's nonsense. And I call it a runaway train. That doesn't mean we can't slow it down. That doesn't mean we can't. But if we could do anything in the U.S., and one of the things I do have is a invite out to some politicians to literally come on and just, how do we, this isn't, so many people assume that these types of podcasts are attack mode. I have, I'm not looking to offend anybody. What I'm looking to do is share the information. So if you, Keith, were a politician in the state of Ohio where I'm at, I would love to say, how do we at least get this information shared to multiple states? Let's start there. How do we at least have a discussion? Because, at the end of the day, nobody wants to see floating garbage or garbage on the sidewalk or in state parks or whatever. Nobody wants that. Okay, but why are we tolerating this then? And why have we accepted it? It's just, so, and we really need to know from a political side, and I know you would, same thing in the UK, but from the political side, how do you start the dialogue? How do you get past the politicians that are running for office and saying all the right things to people that actually do what they say they're going to do? Quite a concept. It's crazy.
Yes. I totally agree with you there. And certainly as far as the UK is concerned, and going back to what you were talking about earlier about families are not friendly towards recycling or anything like this, this goes back certainly to my childhood, when my parents taught me, you don't throw that away. We put that in the bag and take it home and put it in our dustbin. This was fine, and it was ingrained in my mind, and I wouldn't have thought of throwing things away. But sadly, these days, people are not doing that. I think families are not as, shall we say, good as they used to be 30, 40 years ago, because there's a lot of single women families over here. Probably the States are the same. Awful lot of migrants who have different rules in the countries they come from. And somehow we've got to get them all to gel together. And with regards to the states in America all talking the same, I would like to hope that there is a central meeting where representatives from every state talk to each other.
Correct.
Because if there isn't, then there's no hope. Over here, local authorities, there is a central local authority group in London, which is supposed to look after the local authorities. But luckily, the Chartered Institute of Waste Management, of which I'm a member, is extremely active and is pushing like mad to move things. So I'm talking to collectors all the time of waste, and they, like me and you, are waiting for government to issue some comments, which they have now done.
Good.
And we have now got to work out a system of collecting everything consistently throughout the UK, so that a bin, it may be labelled number 1, has got paper and board in it, number 2 has got plastics in it, etc., etc.
Oh, yeah.
But in turn, that means we also need more recycling units, which aren't there because investors obviously weren't going to spend their money not knowing what government were going to do. But now that is moving forward. I'm hoping we will get more investors that will create recycling because unlike, I don't think you've got this in the States, but here on plastics, we have a plastic tax on all packaging that does not contain a 30% recycled content.
Wow.
And that means you've got to get recycled plastic to do that.
Yeah.
And obviously the big boys have all signed up and got all their recycled plastic. And the smaller companies that make up the majority of people selling products in this country, they can't get it.
No.
And even when they try to get it, the price is enormous. So the price of recycled plastics here is more expensive than virgin material. So it is often better for people to pay the tax on virgin material because that works out cheaper than trying to buy recycled material. In addition, with recycling, we have the debate here, and I think you've got the same in the States, of mechanical recycling versus chemical recycling. I'm not too sure what's happening at the moment. I don't know whether Dr. Chris himself knows, but to my mind, chemical recycling has a lot of problems and there could be a lot of fallout from it because the majority of packaging is used for food and pharmaceuticals, which takes up the largest area of all packaging. And as such, has to be of the highest quality and not damage food or people. And mechanical recycling does this, but we don't have enough doing it.
You know what? And you mentioned something when we first talked a few weeks ago, and you just brought it up now, which is brilliant, because this is really what is going to, you and I can have all the opinions we want, Keith. You and I can have all the ideas. But if there is not a way for investors to see that they can make money from doing something and creating the process or the machines or the systems or the follow through or whatever, that's what it's going to take. Because at the end of this, let's face it, money rules the world, sadly. And if we have investors and companies that are saying, wait a minute, this will work, and this is how we're going to do it and monetize it. Because right now we have very few companies, at least in the US, that are going out because the rules are so disjointed and there's nothing consistent. So any company that's actually actively involved in whether it's recycling or compostability or whatever it may be, a lot of that is their own money. A lot of that is there, and very few investors are jumping on board. But there's a shit ton of money that's out there that's available if somebody would actually just tap into that, you know. And I know that it's available, and that's why part of this podcast and sharing this information is to get those companies on, get those investors on. What do they look for? What kind of a return? How long would they be wanting to invest their billions or millions and billions and then see a return on their money, you know, and those kind of things. But there's serious opportunities here that we haven't even scratched the surface on when it comes to recyclability and reuse and being able to make new products out of packaging. And it's just mind blowing to me how people aren't educated enough about it.
And of course, investors may have lost sight of different things during COVID and obviously are not investing as much as maybe they would have done before COVID. And of course, COVID was an excellent opportunity for the plastics industry to supply loads of things, which
my goodness,
gave them a lot of profit. So anyone who'd invested in plastics at that stage would have got a return on their investment. And the same now of cosmetics. Cosmetics are apparently on the up because with everybody hard up, the woman says, oh, no, I've still got to get my lipstick and my this, that, or the other. And they go out and they get this. So more money is being spent on cosmetics in the UK. And
same here.
These are areas where if one looks at it carefully, investors can invest money. And I was involved, and just as an aside here, with an investor who I still know very well and talk to him regularly, on the first paper bottle investment.
I was just going to bring up something like that. Yeah.
That was 6 years ago.
Yep.
It did not succeed. I won't say where it went. There are a number of people who are purporting to produce a paper bottle, but nobody has yet produced a full paper bottle.
Yep.
They all have liners or coatings of plastics on them. For the simple reason, you've got to have that to protect your product.
Yeah, and it's
where plastics comes in on its own. And
100%.
Why we're getting rid of plastics for paper bottles, I have no idea.
I'm with you, and it's so interesting to me because one of the things that when Dr. Chris and I would go, he's got very, very strong opinions on a couple of different types of packaging. Number one is the glass. He literally says, look, I understand where people say he's all about, and I agree with him, he's all about the life cycle analysis. You cannot just look at a particular type of packaging, I should say, and just assume that because it's recyclable, it's better, or it's the best product to packaging to use. Meaning his whole premise has always been based upon, look, you have to look at the amount of time and energy and money it takes to not only create a glass jar or bottle, but then to pick it back up, ship it to a grinder to basically chip it back up into, pellets, if you will, and grind it back up into glass. And if you look at all of that involved, and he made a very good point. We were doing a video in Columbus, Ohio, kind of the middle of the state, and he said, where do you think spaghetti sauce companies and peanut butter companies, whatever that may be, they collect all this glass? Where do they send it? And I was like, I've never heard of a glass. I know glass is recyclable. He goes, it's not, you have to send it to the West Coast. So you have to literally take the glass from the Midwest, truck it to 12 states over. Imagine the fuel. And then you have to grind it up and then truck it back. It doesn't make sense, or it doesn't make recycling sense when you compare it to something else that could replace that. However, there's a lot of deep pockets in the glass business, just like the aluminum can business, Keith, just like the steel side of things. Oh, no, you're not going to take that away from us. But in reality, if you look at the entire life cycle analysis, it's a no-brainer, but it's baffling to me.
That's an interesting one because I didn't realize you had such problems with glass in America. Here, it's far easier because there's a lot of glass manufacturers near us in Europe. We've got quite a few in the UK, including the biggest one, which is Encirc, which is up in Liverpool, and it is the best factory I have ever been round.
No kidding.
In 58 years.
Wow.
It is superb. It was started by an Irishman who's no longer with us, but it is superb. And glass is collected and will go back and is put in as cullet to make new glass bottles. And as such, glass is obviously essential, certainly in many areas such as pharmaceuticals. And I wouldn't want to buy malt whiskey in anything other than a glass bottle because I am sure it would be tainted over the years via the plastics. I would argue with Dr. Chris over this, but I think he probably would agree with me. But
I think really at the end of the day, though, the one thing that is telling is it's not that it's anti-glass in any stretch. We just have to make it more efficient to be able to collect and do it and reuse it and clean it or whatever they do with it. And that goes back to our original point about making it, investors and, make it friendly for them to see where they could actually make money from this. And we got away with, when I was a kid, I don't know what it was like in the UK, but when I was a kid, you used to get money for returning bottles. And they eliminated that, at least in most states they have. And
because plastics came in. That's what did it.
Well, and just even, if we look at any of the countries, I don't know whether it's Finland or Denmark or maybe all of them, whatever it is, that are constantly touted for having such great recycling programs, they incentivize it. You just return these products to either to a store or it's collected in consistent receptacles. The point is that there's a process. And the one thing that drives me crazy here, it's not just a state problem in the US, Keith. It's a city problem. So underneath all of this, the state of Ohio defers to the individual communities. So it's even worse. If it was one state saying our rules are going to be the same as Pennsylvania's or the same as Michigan, that would be one thing. I could go to the next town over 3 miles down the road, and they have completely different rules and laws for recycling. They have completely different guidelines on what you do. How are we going to make any sort of and we all know that you go to the affluent towns and they have, they've got a great recycling program. Yeah, because they pay $25 an hour for a guy to go sorting that through. Whereas you go to another town like the city of Cleveland, who's going to pay somebody minimum wage to go and do it. That's not good. We've got a problem there. It's just crazy how that works.
And that's interesting because you mentioned Europe, and the reason they're successful is that in their infancy, they kept control of waste management.
Thank you.
Therefore, they don't have a problem. The government turns around and says, we're doing this, we're doing that. And the only problem they have got is that I think the different countries in Europe are arguing with each other now.
Yeah.
But, that is a minor problem compared with the big problems you and I have got.
Yeah.
And I wanted you mentioned that magic word LCA.
Yep.
That is something that every single packaging engineer, technologist should have in their tool bag.
Yep.
Because LCA will be the way forward and the way we understand the costs of things going backwards and forwards in every direction. It so happens a good friend of mine has created software, which is now globally available, which will indicate carbon emissions for whatever the production line is.
Is that ready to be shared now, Keith? Or
yes,
is that something? Please.
Company's name is Benchmark.
Okay, got it.
I'll send you the information.
And I will share it with our listeners and I actually want to reach out and even have them join us because that's some of the things. Yes. Look, at the end of the day, education trumps everything. And when people start to open their eyes and they realize, wait a minute, not only does this make sense, but it makes financial sense, that's when the ball is going to start to turn. And you had mentioned something about control of waste management. My goodness. And the LCA and the life cycle analysis to be able to it really dumbs it down it's the wrong word. It makes it very simple to understand.
Yes.
And that type of software and access to that is really going to be the game changer. Because if we're able to literally say to a retailer or vice versa, the retailers say to their suppliers, this is what we're doing and what, or a government, like you said, the government actually saying, no, this is why we're doing it because the LCA, which is data, which is research, this is not an opinion. This is documented research, scientific. That's when things are going to start to change. We've got all these opinions and no, it's bad. And I'm never going to use a plastic cup again. And it's because of this and paper is the worst thing in the world. And I might, just look at the data. The LCA is where the data is. The LCA is where the data is. And I cannot thank you enough for bringing that up because that to me is the end all be all. And that's how we're going to really make change.
Yes. Couldn't agree more. And certainly that's something that both our countries and all the world should be taking on board.
100%.
And if the cost of getting this software, I have no idea what it costs to get it, but if that is minimum, then SMEs will all be happy to take it on board because they won't have the expertise.
Right.
There are a number of people in the UK that purport to solve LCA problems, but LCA is not a registered process, and therefore the answers that they will give may well be biased by the requirements who is asking for them. It might be marketing biased, it might be production biased, could be transport biased, who knows?
Yeah.
And we really need to get some rules and legislation down globally to indicate
I never
how
thought
we
of
do
that, but
LCA.
you're absolutely spot on, because if the data in is skewed, then the data out will be skewed.
Yeah, absolutely.
But if we have rules and literally set up in such a way, that's brilliant. And I never thought about that, because that really in and of itself is a way to control the data that goes in and the data that comes out. And goodness, that's just brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Yeah, I love it. I love it.
And the other thing I was going to mention, talking about what is happening in the States, I can certainly get people from Michigan State University involved. They have a big section on sustainability in packaging, which is certainly needed if we all want to get to a circular economy, which is, again, one of the big buzzwords around the world. And Helen MacArthur started it. I've had presentations from Helen MacArthur years ago. And it's really moving forward, and thank goodness for her. So there's an awful lot of things that could be done, and we could get bigger people onto a podcast so that can be pushed out there for more people to understand what is happening, hopefully make an effect on them.
Well, and it's interesting. And as a side note, so I was invited to speak, and just hear me out for a second. So I was invited to present to like this recycling. There was a recycling trade show like 2 weeks ago, somewhere in Atlanta or something. And again, there was a call and a couple of months ago for what topics would you talk about? And I talked my pitch, and I did a video, and I sent this over, and I said, I believe that we have to get, very much like you were talking about, getting back to the ground level of educating people. And if you want to talk about, educating salespeople, educating buyers, educating decision makers about consistent information about this, LCAs, packaging, whatever, I was flat out declined. Like, no, thanks, we're not interested. It wasn't sexy enough. And that to me says a lot. This isn't a knock necessarily. I get it, because I'm not Smuckers. I'm not Moen Faucets. I'm not Dyson. They want to have the big names that come in there and talk about and pat each other on the back, Keith. Oh, look at what we're doing. Look at what we're doing. Look at us. But nothing's changing. This is all you talking about what you're doing. That's great. But at the ground level, you're still using the same. And I just think to myself, okay, that's when I said, you know what? It's guys like Keith and Dr. Chris, myself, that are going to begin to start this train, because they're not going to be able to shut us up anymore. We need to be able to get to the ground level. We need to be able to say, look, you guys can all pat yourselves on the back all you want, knock yourself out, but it's still a mess. We still need to do something. So please don't talk about it. Don't tell me what your directives are to be carbon neutral by 2050. That's great. We're now in 2023. Okay. What are we doing now? So, and it's just like, that's why I'm excited, because I know this is just the beginning. And I know that you're so willing and gracious with your time to share and connect. And because I just think this is just one of those things that's going to take a concerted effort and keep bringing people together, and sharing a consistent message. So a lot of the younger people are not necessarily living on LinkedIn. They're on TikTok. They're on Instagram. And if we serve it up to them, not in goofy, this is real information. And if you talk to young people, and I know you have, and I have, they want change. They want change, and they're frustrated just as much as we are. They're going, I don't want to use this. I want to take it back or recycle it or send it here. I want to do my part, but we've kind of tied their hands. So there's so much of this that we will take and we will share and we will build upon. And I know afterwards we'll chat and hopefully I can connect with some more people at Michigan State. Obviously, friends from the UK are always welcome too, because you have a very unique look at these things. Because like you said about glass can work if you have the process in place to clean it, recycle it, whatever. glass is very expensive to work with if you have one recycler in the all 50 states. It just doesn't work. How I like to end our podcast is always say, okay, Keith, you've got the magic wand, you've got the crystal ball, and what do we do immediately? What can we do to change the world? To change, just not change the world as far as politically or whatever it is. I'm talking about what we're talking about, the packaging side of things. Where do we start? Is there anything that you would say, I would start here, whether it's political or whatever, but just throwing that out there to see if you have any thoughts on that. It's a loaded question.
Not for me, it's not loaded, but I would start by making sure that we consistently collect waste. And that will be from the customers, the general public, and in a way that immediately gives us the opportunity to get recycling moving. It also would help to stop littering and dumping things, as long as the public that we're collecting from understand what they're doing and it's consistent wherever they are. So someone from New York going to Cleveland, it would be the same in Cleveland as it is in New York. So I would love to see that happen. I like to hope it will happen, and that's what I'm working with on the Chartered Institute of Waste Management. And that will also solve a lot of the problems of plastics pollution, because most of the pollution is because it's dumped.
Yes, thank you.
Stop that, then that will help that situation. And there may be other areas in the future that will cause problems, but that is my biggest requirement at the moment and what I'm pushing like mad.
And just as you said that, and I, even myself, tend to overcomplicate things. But it really is a simple step. What you've proposed here, Keith, is a consistent effort to collect waste. This isn't a collective effort to dissect waste and analyze waste. This is about, if we improve the collection of waste, then, like you said, the next step to being able to recycle and separate it and get it to the right places, which will make more sense, as you're saying, for investors to go, hey, I could actually do something with this recycled, or I can actually do something with this kind of a material. And as much as I was thinking, and forgive me, but I was thinking, Keith will have some sort of it is so brilliant because it's so simple. Collect waste better. Collect waste better. And with that in mind, one of the calls I have out there is to some waste management companies, at least here in the US, and find out how they are handling this. Because it's not, again, I'll tie this up in a quick interview I did with a gentleman who runs the city and county of Honolulu. And the Hawaiian Islands, you want to talk about having issues with waste. And the fact that they literally are in the middle of the ocean, it's life or death out there for them, Keith. They can't afford to to have a generation that just throws crap away and just throws it and litters it. And this guy said from the minute he was born, because this goes back generationally, all he's ever done and his parents have ever done is take the waste and the garbage and separate it at home, take this one here, take this one there, take this bag over here, or whatever that is. He goes, this is all I know. And he runs an entire department. He goes, but I'm fighting a losing battle. He goes, I'm talking with people, especially imagine Honolulu. You've got tourists that are flying over from Cleveland and everybody else. And they're just like, just throw it on the ground, just whatever. I don't know where it goes. He was like, we're going to become an entire wasteland here if we cannot change how we do things. It's just, it's crazy.
And if I can add to that, the other thing that we have to consider is education.
Yes, thank you. And that too, there's so many different tentacles. And Keith, this was a thrill for me, man. And I am so glad we're connected. I want to do this again. And without a doubt, please keep us in mind, and any thought that crosses your mind, we're going to do this again. But this was really a thrill for me, and I'm so grateful for us taking the time.
Yeah, and I've been mightily pleased. I had no idea because this is the first podcast I've ever done. I shall do more. We had a meeting this morning of local societies within the Institute of Materials, Minerals and Mining.
Right.
And I mentioned podcasts and they said, oh, yes, we are doing a few. And I said, well, we never hear about them. And so I'm going to start stirring it up in this country and probably do my own podcast.
Well, and I love that because it's one of those things that we all can get into and share a message. And there's nothing here other than, and I know your heart's in the right place, is just sharing information. Just share information. This isn't about taking a stand or hitting somebody over the head with "I'm better than you" and "you're better." No, this is just know the truth, know the facts, know the truth, and take action accordingly.
Years stuck up in my brain. I want that out so that other people can understand.
100%, 100%. Well, thanks, my friend. I am so glad for the time, and this was a blast for me. So I will send you the final file, and again, I'm just gonna. You and I are done on this. I'll shut the Zoom off in a second, Keith, but this is a thrill. This is a thrill. I had a blast.
Yeah, me too. And
thank you, friend.
Let's hope we can do some more.
Well, we will, buddy. Have a good rest of the day.
You too.